Hello everybody and welcome to this week's Old School Q&A. I'm your host Mod Sween and I'm very, very pleased to be joined by Mod Kieran.
Hello.
Ash.
Hello.
Bruno.
Hey.
And Oasis.
Hello.
We've also got Mod Tide on the chat, so at Old School RuneScape to say hi or send them any questions you'd like asked. And we've got Mod John making things happen behind the scenes. Thanks Mod John. What do we got? So you'll notice some commands, exclamation mark PvP ideas. That gives you like a formal route for submitting any PvP ideas. I'll get onto that a bit later on. And exclamation mark game update. You'll be able to learn about the content added in this week's game update. And we're going to run through that anyway. Now, I guess. I've got a big list here. Would anybody like to try and pitch it from memory?
Well, perhaps Oasis would like to talk about Phoenixes, or Phoenixes, how they're pronounced, and Explore emotes.
So yeah, starting off, we have the new Phoenix recolors. You have white, purple, green, blue, and then you have your original red, which you get from the original Phoenix from Wintertodt. It costs 250 firelighters to recolor it, 250 each time you want to recolor. So we have a bit of a firelighter sink. As well as that, we have the new Explore emote, which some of you might remember from when was it first?
Quite a long time
Quite a long time ago.
Other RuneScape historically, pre-EOC maybe.
Oh, fair enough. That takes 600 beginner clues to unlock. If you've done more than 600 beginner clues, you just have to complete one more, and you'll unlock the emote, which is quite nice.
Fantastic. What else would we add? There's an optional welcome screen. So a bit of context to that. Previously we tested an updated welcome screen layout which replaced some information we consider to be less important, and we replaced that with more relevant information. The test went well, so we've rolled the update out to everybody. But we know that some of you might not want the change, so you're able to click a switch style option at the top left if you prefer to see the welcome screen as it was.
Yeah, it gives us a space to be able to put like that nice, I mean, you can see it right now if you log in the game, right? Some really nice artwork from the Nightmare, and we're able to give you things like release dates in a very clear way that you can see. So that should be useful if you do want it, but obviously if you don't like it, toggle it off. Absolutely fine.
I certainly like it better now it's got the Nightmare rather than some of the other pictures we've had.
A small change for colourblind players. They're now able to better distinguish between different coloured baby dragons. The full and half full imp in a box looks more distinguishable from an empty imp in a box, or just a box. And we've also moved some bounty hunter rewards. So obviously last week we temporarily removed the bounty hunter minigame, and rightfully so, you wanted to be able to acquire the rewards. So to run through them quickly, Slayer Masters now sell the rune pouch for 1.2 million GP. Iron players cannot buy it. Slayer Masters also sell the looting bag for 30,000 GP. Again, Iron players cannot buy it.
Oh, they can get that one, sorry.
Oh, they can, sorry.
Yeah, we had that fixed in the news post before the publication, but I guess it didn't quite get to you all.
The Ornate Maul Handle is available in the Last Man Standing reward shop for 15 points. Saradomin's Tier is available in the Last Man Standing reward shop for 150 points. The Magic Shortbow Scroll, Ring of El Scroll, and the Clue Box have been added to the Wilderness Slayer loot table.
This is indeed roughly what we did before, other than that on that occasion we actually forgot about the Clue Box, I think, so that wasn't available anywhere. And also the Tier and the Maul, well, the Maul didn't exist, and the Tier wasn't such a big deal at the time, so those two we've put on Last Man Standing now since we're trying to send a bit more traffic there. In the absence of one minigame, we hoped maybe we could get some more traffic to another one, especially as we also reinstalled the high stakes option. It's not very high stakes, by the way, although it became higher in this update. Might be on your list later.
It certainly is.
Cool. Since high stakes mode hadn't been a thing for, well, ages, I don't think we've enabled it since like 2017 or something, and the minigame hadn't been very heavily used lately. We didn't want to have, well, a 500k hurdle or million coin hurdle to even have a go at the thing. So we started it last week on 50k and doubled it this week to 100k. What we'd like to do in future is bring back cash coin rewards to the competitive mode, like it used to have before last summer. Now, there's a caveat to that. If we do, then of course they won't be very high because it's not high stakes mode, at which point high stakes mode can be proper high again. But at the moment we let Iron players do the competitive mode, and if we were going to put the coins in there again, I think we'd have to restrict how many they'd be allowed to win. That would not be very nice for them, but realistically we don't want to have to block them for the entire minigame. Anyway, that's me on that topic for now.
Cool. I've seen some players in the chat ask why we haven't added the maul handle for something like the Grotesque Guardians. So Ash touched upon the fact that we felt like it made more sense having the reward with a PvP minigame for consistency, because after all, we do envisage it to be a temporary thing. If it was a brand new item, perhaps, sure, it could be thematically fitting, but for now we're happy with the choice to attach it to the Last Man Standing store.
Acknowledging that we did put some of the other things on Wilderness Slayer, the Shortbow Scroll, the Vigor Wealth Scroll and the Clue Box, but for the maul handle, it felt like a slightly bigger deal, so we prefer to keep that one on a minigame since we've got a minigame.
And just to confirm the high stakes entry fee now, so it's up to 100k, and it could rise further. I think it's just up to us, really.
We, as I mentioned, when we've got cash rewards back in competitive mode, assuming that gets to go ahead, then there'll be low stakes, so high stakes can be really high stakes if we want it to be.
Really high stakes mode.
It was 1 million, I think. That is pretty darn high for a minigame that duration.
And finally, we've made some changes to PvP worlds. So we've replaced the Bounty Hunter world with another PvP world, effectively removing the PvP world rota. So it's now world 24 and 25, I believe.
That's right. The rota moves the members' PvP world, not the extra high risk one, between 24 and 25. For the moment, we've opened both to see if the lack of the Bounty Hunter minigame means that there's more people available to play on that world instead, or that kind of world. It was requested a fair bit over the last week, so we were willing to give it a try. Traffic may not be sufficient for it, in which case we will take it back down to 1 again and continue the rota from where it starts again next week. But in addition to those, we had other suggestions about PvP worlds now that we're getting more attention, and we've enacted a couple of those as well on a trial basis, as mentioned in the news post. Now, one of them was about PJ timer. The PJ timer in single ways on PvP worlds had been 10 seconds, and it was felt by some that wasn't really long enough to loot a pile and get on your way before you got ganked by the next player. So we've tried increasing it to 15, see how that goes. Now we're aware that a lot of people were not keen on this kind of change because they liked, maybe being able to gank the person who was still looting the previous pile, or maybe they were really good about looting really fast and they didn't feel it to be necessary. So if it doesn't work out, like the thing with having 2 worlds at once, we can stop that again. Likewise for the range of combat levels in which you can be attacked. In order to maybe help a few more players have a go at using these worlds, we reduce the danger slightly by reducing the threshold of combat, the range of combat levels in which you can be attacked, from 15 down to 10. Now we know that one was controversial, and again, we'll be very happy to take it out if it doesn't work out. Thank you.
Sweet, that covers everything I've got on my list. Thank you very much, Ash. And just a reminder, we've got Mod Tide on the chat, so at Old School RuneScape, should you have any questions you'd like answered. I think I'll begin with those before we move on to the questions on my document. Who should we go for first? Lonely Dad 420 asks, what are the Magic Shortbow and View Scrolls drop rates from Wilderness Slayer right now? I don't know if anyone has that from memory.
So, I don't remember. Well, the chance of getting onto that table depends on what you're killing, of course, it being Wilderness Slayer. I think it goes like up to 1 in 30 if you're killing a boss. Previously, of course, that roll would just give you the Slayer Enchantment scroll. Now it's divided up into 8, where 3 and 8 would be the enchantment scroll that you're used to, 2 and 8 and 2 and 8 for, I think, the clue box and the Ring of Wealth thing, and 1 and 8 for the Magic Shortbow thing. Might have got a couple of those mixed up, but Mod Gambit posted the correct answer on Twitter earlier today, I think. So maybe you can find where he posted it if you want to check.
Excellent, thank you. And Gravis Avi, I think I'm saying that right, asked whether we are working on the problem linking a Game Center account to an email. Do we have an update on where we are with that?
I don't know.
Okay. I know work is underway on it. In terms of ETA, I'm not too sure. I'll endeavour to try and find out.
Yeah, that one's not entirely within our control, because some of the difficulties we've got there is what the app stores will and won't allow us to link to, and to fulfil the requirements of an app store and abide by their rules. Sometimes we've got to try submitting different versions of it and see which ones they don't reject, if we can't quite work out what it is they need us to do to tick the boxes. It's something the company cares about quite a lot, as you can imagine, but I'm afraid we haven't got there yet.
Cool, thank you. So we covered Bounty Hunter briefly in the game update changes earlier, but the first question I've got is, what are you doing with Bounty Hunter and PvP? I've got a short answer prepared, but I'd welcome any input should anybody have anything to add. So to kind of reiterate our plans from what we mentioned in last week's news post, Friday's news post, I believe, so beyond this week, we do still intend to bring back Bounty Hunter in late March. And in addition to that, we see the need to take a long-term view of what PvP is and what our long-term strategy for PvP should be. So to that end, we're spending time in February working on that, which involves the usual design process with ideation days, spending time off-site to discuss what we need to do. We will share the results of that, and we've also set up a formal route for you to send ideas through, which is osrs.game/PvP ideas, or you might type !PvP ideas in chat to be sent the link to that. That's all I've got to add on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just this process. We need to determine our big strategy. It's not enough for us to say, we need to fix this minigame and improve that minigame. That's just part of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to look at the whole picture, and that's what we're trying to do with this.
And aside from the team actually designing things directly, a lot of the question would be, how do you get the right players' views into your considerations? Like, you can look at, say, Reddit, Twitter, whatever, and find a lot of random thoughts. They're not all going to represent the whole community. That's why when I talked about the PvP world changes today, we acknowledge they may not work out, and we can revert them if they don't, which I think we maybe will, given the number of players who are very, very upset about them. Although hopefully we'll be able to keep 2 worlds at once. I did think that was worth trying, and I hope it works out. But the question of how you get player input for a design and that have the rest of the players confident that this was legit from real players like themselves, even if they don't entirely agree on every aspect, that is not so straightforward. We've naturally done various things like having a load of expert players brought into the office last year, and we spent quite a long time getting a whole list of PvP requests out of them, a lot of which we enacted around June, May last year, I think it was, to be met by other players saying, no, these weren't the right ideas, you listened to the wrong players there, you should listen to us instead. And frankly, identifying who were the right people to listen to has not been straightforward. People have very kindly sent us lists of the right people in their opinion. Of course, there may be other opinions.
Cool, thank you. The next question I have is, what are you doing about the high scores and the laggy game worlds?
High scores first, because these are two, I think, completely unrelated issues. So high scores, since I think with the release of the boss, high scores have been fairly laggy. Sometimes you'll try to load your account on there or search some player up. It just maybe sometimes it'll fail, maybe sometimes it'll take 30 seconds. It's under a load of load. It's got a load of load on that server, basically. A load of load. That's interesting. Where we are right now, we are still in the investigation phase. That's what we need to work out. A lot of people have asked for us to disable the boss high scores, until we can fix it long term. We think that's fairly sensible. We don't actually know if disabling the boss high scores will just fix it right now. We've never really taken a high score away, and we don't know exactly where that problem is. So that team will need to have a look into that in the first place. But any work we put on that team has the potential to affect things like clans and Group Iron Man. So we do need to be careful with how we do this. So we're going to investigate, and we'll hopefully have something to communicate with you soon. Unfortunately, there's nothing more we can say at this point in time. I think most of us have the opinion that if we can take down the boss high scores and then fix high scores longer term, that's the way to go. I think that's preferable than having this situation where we have the high scores taking 30 seconds to load, because that's not okay.
And even if we can't get them off the website, having them stop updating, if that were enough to make it better, then we'd go with that.
Yeah, if there's any compromise solution in the meantime, even better, right? That'd be great. But these are questions we don't know the answer to yet.
But we're aware that as an issue, and we are looking into it, and we'll inform you when we have an answer. Like EGain World, do we have anything to say on that?
Maybe no more there.
So there's a lot of processes going on in those game worlds which could be contributing to them slowing down sometimes, quite apart from network lag, which is an entirely separate matter from any code the server processes. Players often do tend to assume that if they're getting slow connections, it must be because of the server at the other end of the connection. Never quite figured where that one came from, but anyway, let's look for the moment at what the server is doing. A lot of the processes will be about, of course, the gameplay, executing your requests when you click on items, click on monsters, click on each other, etc. And those are things where we try to keep the code optimized. And obviously this isn't a new thing for you to be complaining about. As early as, well, it's been a while back that we started trying to find the most expensive ones. We got some profiling in from the engine team to help us spot the really expensive ones. And we've had some changes made to optimize them. For example, just changing the order of checks being run so that it minimizes how much code has to be run when you switch items, because that happened to be one of the suspicious, really big ones that came up on the profiling. Example was like in the code for when you switch items, it was doing a check to see, are you unequipping anything? If so, if it's in one of these categories, do the side effect we need. And separate from that, it was running more checks to say, if the item you're unequipping is one of these, do this. Else it's one of these, do this. Else one of these, do this. By moving all of those inside the first check for whether there's an item being unequipped at all, people equipping an item without unequipping something simultaneously never run all that code. So that should be quite a big improvement. Now, obviously it hasn't been enough yet. I've got another batch of changes for the core of combat, which is again associated with when you switch items, and it rebuilds the side interface and checks what kind of stance you should be in for the kind of weapon you've got equipped. That's awaiting testing at the moment, because one does not change that code lightly when it deals with item switching.
Is it mostly PvP worlds that are or PvP themed worlds that are having this problem?
It's most reported by players trying to do that, although people using the Inferno also report it, probably because they are badly affected when things go slowly.
Yeah,
but,
that makes sense.
The profiling suggests that item switching is involved, and that's why I've been putting in a lot of focus, because at the very least it can't hurt. Now, there's other stuff that a game world does that is not controlled by our team, like people want to log into it. It has to, process their authentication request and process all that. We've had trouble with that kind of thing in previous years. Hopefully, there isn't another one of those locking things up. But if there is, I'd expect the engine team will hopefully be able to find it and make it not do so like Mod Atlas did before.
Thank you very much.
Well, that's
Incredible
the third of the
answer.
stream done. Someone else next.
Yep,
I
absolutely.
mean, potentially on stuff like PvP. I mean, back in the day, Bounty Hunter was restricted to just Bounty Hunter, right? You couldn't do other things on that world.
Yes.
Potentially things like that could end up helping.
Zortex in the chat suggests, why don't we use switch case? I did.
A few questions from the chat before I continue. Barnes asks on the ETA for Mod Road's esports blog. I'm afraid I don't have an ETA on that, but once we do have one, we'll share it with you. Finn Keros asks, could it be made so the Cerberus lava pools despawn when Cerberus itself dies?
I think that job's in the backlog awaiting a dev's spare time.
Excellent. Okay, I'll go back to the document. Let me
It's called
scroll.
Tidy Up Cerberus, but I'm pretty sure that's what it's asking for.
Next question. So you've been talking about nerfing Zalcano for a while. What's going on? I've spoken to Moded.
Oh, you've got the answer.
I have one. I mean, you're welcome to give one.
Go for it.
Sure.
Direct from the source is probably better than what I can remember. So,
So we've got drop data, or data on the drops, rather. We've received some recommendations based on that data, and we'll be enacting those in coming weeks. We're not going to share specifically what we're doing just yet, though, because obviously drop tables are quite a sensitive topic, can affect prices. But yeah, we'll be making changes in the coming weeks. Okay, next question concerns the Nightmare. Could you clarify the way the boss fight begins? If it's only one iron group and one regular group per world, aren't you worried about it being full in each world?
So the way that the Nightmare works in terms of the grouping is you have two groups that can be made. There's the non-Iron Man group and the Iron Man group. If you are a non-Iron Man player and you go in, when you go in and there's no one in there, the instance will be made, and from that, after you wait about 40 seconds, the boss fight will start. In between those 40 seconds, you have time to get your team together. If you're not ready, you can leave. If you are ready, you can go ahead and start the fight. Once the fight is started, you can't go into the boss fight until the fight's either over or no one's in there and everyone's died and left. The same things for the Iron Man. So you go in, you have 40 seconds to group up. Once those 40 seconds are done, the boss starts to fight you. If you are concerned about crashing, then that's probably going to be an issue during the start. It always is when it comes to things that are like this. You can always try to find a world with less people in it, or even just team up with random people. It shouldn't be too much of an issue. Griefing might not really be that much of an issue because the boss is designed to get rid of the people if they're not really doing anything. If you stood in the boss for a minute and you don't do anything, you'll get kicked out, which will also close the instance. So I hope that's answered it.
That closes the instance if no one's left, right?
Yeah,
Good. Rather than somebody's leeching, so my fight ended.
Yeah.
What do you mean by doing anything? If you're running around being attacked, trying to avoid, but you're not attacking back, you're just trying to eat and stay alive, would you then be punished?
It's pretty generous in the sense that you have to be doing no damage at all to anything for a whole minute.
Okay.
If you're not doing any damage to anything for a whole minute, then we assume that you're sort of griefing or just holding up the instance for everyone else so they can't go in, so we'll kick you out.
Cool. So I have questions about the gauntlet. So players are asking us to change a few things. Mod Gambit kindly put together a list. Here's some suggestions. Add some different bosses, even one or two for variety. How would you like to approach this? Shall I run through the list or one by one?
One by one.
Cool.
So in terms of adding new bosses, it's not as easy as it seems. It takes quite a while to design the bosses, make the mechanics for them, get everything ready. So whilst in development, the focus of the entire gauntlet was just have one boss at the end and a very polished dungeon, which will hopefully be enough. We know people aren't very happy with the dungeon as it is right now, so we are thinking of doing some quality of life changes to it and improving it, but I don't think a whole new boss will be the thing we'll be going for because that's a lot of work.
Okay, next one. Could you add more tier 3 monster spawns in the outer rooms?
Yes, that's one thing we'd also like to do. We understand that it is quite unfair if you go through the entire raid and you don't really find what you're looking for, so one of the quality of life changes we would like to do would be to add more not bosses, but mini bosses in the outer layers, in the outer areas, so that you can more easily get set up and ready for the fight.
Okay.
Sorry, Mud Ty, could you scroll down the chat?
Oh yeah.
Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, we've missed everything. Could you buff the staff to make up for augury not offering a damage increase?
Yeah, so we try to be fair on the balancing and try to not make the staff overpowered. But we understand that the staff is quite underpowered since no one really wants to use it. So increasing the damage on the staff is something we're happy to do.
Okay. Could you make it possible to reach both tier 3 armor and weapon with good resource drops and an efficient run?
Might be asking a bit too much. If you want efficiency, then you shouldn't really have to need everything tier 3. There's definitely enough time for you to get tier 3 everything right now, unless you're really unlucky. And with the changes we plan on making, hopefully it'll be even easier for you to get tier 3 everything and not have to hope that you get the drops you want for the weapons you want to use.
Cool. Thank you very much. So the next question I've got is not so much game content, but more how we communicate to you, the players. Is the push notification sent on the weekend a sign of things to come? So just on that, so some push notifications were sent to mobile players on Saturday, and from your feedback, it's really quite clear that we didn't really get the messaging right. And
hero.
And we've given that feedback. So what we've taken away is the fact that we need to make sure the message itself is right and it's reaching the right people. In a reply I made on Reddit, I said like we shouldn't be telling max players that Dragon is red and Mithril was blue. Interesting note, a few Colour Wide players reached out to me explaining, what do you mean Mithril was blue? I thought it was purple all these years. I have to be bearer of bad news there.
I mean, I think you could almost describe Mithril as purpley anyway.
No, it's blue.
I don't think
Let's not have
push
that.
notifications for unusual questions that we just feel like well, it'd be novel, but I don't think it's going to be good marketing.
I mean, for me, it's worth noting, like, we've just started doing push notifications. The team is experimenting a little bit to see what works, what doesn't work, and obviously you guys are new to them as well, so it's good to get your feedback on what you want to see. The messaging on this one perhaps wasn't right, and we can definitely refine that. But it's also difficult because you can't contextualize it to say, like, okay, this player who's receiving this message is a noob, this player who's getting it is maxed. You can't exactly just differentiate the message, but you could do it manually. You could, because we send them to a list of players that has been generated, we could then say, okay, we shouldn't send it to players who are currently active on desktop, even if you haven't played mobile in the last month or so.
Yeah,
it doesn't make sense to, because if they're still active on the game, that's fine. You don't really need a notification to remind you.
I'd also wonder whether it might have gone to players who have more than one account, one of which is inactive, but the other one is very active.
But the one we did at the weekend wasn't even the first push notification. They did a smaller one a little prior to that, and actually it was really effective at getting a bunch of players back into the game. So it is a useful tool for players who are no longer playing to be able to potentially get more players back on Old School.
Yep. What I did see was a clear kind of hunger for more information, just relevant information that you want. So whether it's us manually pushing a notification, and rather than saying "Oi hero," it's just giving you like a one-liner of what the game update this week is, or perhaps a teaser for upcoming content.
Yeah, that stuff sounds cool. Like when the Nightmare launches or the Nightmare release dates announced, we can be like, "The Nightmare of Ashihama coming to Old School next week. Log it back on now." Whatever it is, that's a little bit more relevant
And convenient than email. We are also aware of the idea of using that kind of medium to give information about things happening in the game, like when it comes to the midnight reset for your dailies, that kind of thing we could start outputting.
Yeah, so Mod Oasis, if you'd like to talk about local notifications and the work you've been doing.
It's quite a coincidence that literally went out on the weekend, and I kind of finished the initial prototype for notifications last week. It just kind of happened. So kind of what I was working on was a menu for mobile where you can choose what kind of notifications you want to receive in game, and then kind of how they would work. So the current list that I came up with was things like farming. You'll receive a notification when the last thing you planted, currently, the last thing you planted is due to be grown. So say you did your herb run and the last thing you planted was in the Zaya herb patch, and it's got 80 minutes. So even though you've planted some before, it'll queue it just for the end there. And then, hours time, or 80 minutes or more, you'll get a notification saying you should check your farming patches. They should be grown by now, something like that. With farming, we can't go into any crazy detail saying your herb at outside Falador has died, you'll need to replant it. But we can send a kind of general notification saying you should probably check on what you're doing, or what you've grown, I should say. As well as that, something like, I think Tears of Guthix would work quite well. That's like a weekly one, obviously. Bird houses every 4 hours would be quite useful. Daily resets would be a good one. Not getting a message at midnight or 1 minute past midnight to wake you up, but 9 o'clock the next day would probably.
Well, it might work in some time zones. In fact, most of our customers' time zones would probably be fine with it.
Yeah, true. But I think maybe 9 a.m. the next day or something would work a bit better than that. Just to do stuff like Nightmare Zone herb boxes, or I can't think of any others off the top of my head, even though there's a big list. Yep.
Starves.
Yep. All those. It's a big list.
Evolving flax.
But yeah, making sure that it only really goes through for relevant ones. I don't think you really care that the recharge for your Falador, or your ring of the Lumbridge Explorer ring, has recharged, so you can get an extra boost in running. So selecting the right ones is important. And then
the views to have these toggleable, right? So you can choose
exactly
which ones you actually care about.
In fact, quite a lot of your work was making a menu.
Yeah, pretty much. And then, so one thing that we can't control really as content devs is the GE side. So we want grand exchange notifications for when your offers have come through, but that's not really something we can handle on content dev side. Quite a bit of this is still waiting on engine work to be finished, the big word. So there's not really a ETA on when it should be coming out, but it's definitely being worked on, and it's been implemented in better ways than just saying "Oi, hero."
I think Grand Exchange would be an absolutely amazing one to get eventually. So all of this would be incredible.
Yep.
Although I suspect as a meme you could end up using the phrase "Oi, hero" in some of your messages.
Yeah, it'd probably come back at this point.
Cool. Thank you very much, and good work. Next question. Could each tier of the Western Diary increase the Ogre Bellows capacity? This could be a small buff to a niche but required activity in the area.
Are those unique objects per state? Fun.
Fortunately, there's not a whole lot of code uses them other than, inflating your toad, which involves handling all the different coloured ones, but it's...
Oh, that activity is such a pain. I wouldn't just mind having...
It's a bigger pain for the toad.
I mean, that's for sure.
Pain in the butt, literally.
Can we just make one bellows store 100 charges? I mean, the fact you need to get half an inventory of bellows just to get toads is just ridiculous, but it's one of those things.
Cool. Could we add options to change the colour of rugs, curtains and chairs in the player-owned house? The existing red doesn't match the current house themes.
You mean the carpet does not match the drapes?
It's called fashion, darling. Look it up.
Yes, we could.
Okay.
Probably not a whole colour swatch, but we could have some other options at least.
Cool. Could divine potions be moved to a separate tab in the Herb Lore skill guide? Similar to barbarian potions, they're locked behind additional requirements, which the subheaders are useful for delineating.
The raid stuff, sorry.
Divine potions.
Divine potion. Oh, okay.
From somebody else.
I think there are Chambers of Xeric stuff is in the separate tab. Can't remember.
Yeah.
But yeah, the divine potions could well be as well, I think.
Yeah. There's definitely enough space on the skill guide for Herb Lore, so...
While I'm on the topic of divine potions, can we do any better on their 2D icons than we currently have? I haven't looked at it myself, but they're not nice. But I do know how finicky that tool is in terms of trying to get a really nice sprite for that item. But they don't look as nice as regular potions.
Annoyingly, the way the game does those sprites for items is not a pixel sprite at all, because players could send us any number of 2D art assets to use if they were. The game renders the 3D model for when the thing's being dropped on the floor. It takes that 3D model and renders it with Gurad shading and automatic drop shadow, and and a black outline. And that's what's being used as a sprite, which means that just tweak this pixel here or there, or make sure that these pixels are the same number. It becomes a remarkably fiddly thing involving the zoom and orientation of it in 3D space.
It is really annoying because you're not playing with many pixels either in that space. So
36 by 32, I think, and it's not coming from pixels. Anywho, hopefully if they've got a better design in mind, we can. But it wouldn't be as simple as taking a screenshot of somebody's sprite off the internet.
It is one of us actually sitting there with a tool and trying to find something that's better. But I'm pretty sure the team probably did the best they could at the time, but we'll see.
Okay.
It could definitely go in a different section in the menu at some point.
Cool. Sweet. Well, Tide, are you ready for a straw poll? So the next question is, what do the team and community think about a small Grand Exchange tax? It'd be the largest gold sink by far. So obviously we've kind of spoken about this on Q&As before. We've since added the Dual Arena tax, and some players have asked for us to consider a tax on the Grand Exchange.
There's different places one could tie one of those in. For example, we could tax every transaction. That would be the most basic one. A more subtle one would be to, when you put up an offer for one amount and the seller didn't want that much money, so you get some of your money back. If we skimmed a small proportion of that, you're still getting the item you wanted for a price you were willing to pay, and there's still money being taken out of the game in a very seamless way. So I think that one might be more palatable than if we, say, skim 2 or 3% off every transaction you ever do.
Okay, well, there's a link to the straw poll in the chat. I think a lot of people are drawing parallels to the Grand Exchange and then auction houses that exist in other MMOs, and typically they do come with a tax. So I think that's why it's being suggested, has been suggested for quite a while now.
We're aware that it would affect flipping, and that's what we'd be taxing.
Cool. So yeah, unless anyone has another opinion on the taxing game, we'll crack on and wait for the results of the straw poll.
My view is that obviously it would be the most effective, probably gold sink we could do, depending on what rate you put on it. But I'm not sure we actually need it anyway. I don't know. I haven't looked at what the state of gold and inflation is in this game for a little while, but I don't think we're desperate for it.
My opinion as a player is I want to keep my gold. Please don't take my gold away from me.
Exactly. And so I do think most people will be like, oh, that's so annoying that it's changed. And
Okay, so we've got some results in. About 1,100 of you have voted so far. What have we got? So 43% of you don't like it. 33% of you like it. 21% say it depends on the tax level, and 3% of you are indifferent to it.
oh well.
It would depend on the tax level.
Yeah.
After all, the player who's saying the way they want to insta-buy things, they offer way more than it's worth. Yeah, if we took like half of the excess, that would take a lot of money off you. We wouldn't go that far. In fact, if we only took a few coins off, then over time, the amount being drained out of the game would add up, even if it didn't hit you for more than a small amount for each of your trades. So I don't think we'd be bankrupting you, as you might be assuming.
Well, the basic idea is you sort of tax things, the things you don't want players to do, right?
Yeah.
In the world, that's what you do for. That's why things like smoking get taxed.
It's not a sugary drink tax.
But what we're doing if we tax the G is encouraging you to do regular trades. Is that something we want to encourage? I think that's quite cool. I do like that aspect of it. But also, I don't want to sit there as a player and think, oh, I have to go and trade now because I want to save 10 mil on this item because I'm buying something that's worth a lot of money.
That would be a heck of a high tax rate if we were taking that kind
Well,
of...
if it was like a 2 bill item or something like that.
Yeah, I definitely think we should have some sort of limit, even if it was like a 100k limit. It still would annoy me quite a lot if I bought a T-bow and, oh no, here's 3 mil, it's gone.
Yeah, my view is I don't think we need to anytime soon. I don't think we should, unless it really does become a problem we need to tackle.
Cool. Next question. So the player says, I think the reason that some players are put off PvP is because the current death mechanics mean little is risked. Only PvP offers risk, and so that's now inherently off-putting. So when do you plan on addressing the death mechanics?
Well, as we mentioned, well, certainly I was mentioning back in December that it's something we want to work on, like nowish, and we've been putting together an updated blog based on the responses to the last one we put out and the survey that the community staff ran at the time. I'm sorry we didn't get to do more with it back when that was first run, but there were always more urgent things, whereas this was important, but there was a more immediate fire that needed to be put out, and it just always got pushed back. Anywho, we're now getting to spend more time on fixing these things, and I'm very glad about that, even if it's not, very exciting marketing content. I think it will be good for the game to finally deal with it. And blog's coming together. I hope to have that published in the next week, or maybe not next week, but not much longer beyond that, to clarify what we're going to do. Many of you have heard this one before, so apologies if so. But the principle involves, at the moment you've got 60 minutes with your items on the ground. If you were in an instance, that's no use because you can't get back in the instance in most cases. If the world reboots, that's gone. If you can't connect to that world for whatever reason, and it happens, that's no use either. You won't get there within 60 minutes. And also, in a lot of players' cases, they can't remember which world it even was, which seems a bit of a shame there. So we've got a design for a gravestone. The items still go on the ground roughly where you died, not to Lumbridge for your convenience. They stay roughly where you died. But the timer for them counts only while you're online, and the items will be, and the gravestone will be available for you on whichever world you're logged into. Provided, obviously, if you died on a PvP world, we'd make you go on another PvP world to get back there, rather than saying you can just use a much safer one to go and retrieve the items. So that's the principle of it. It means you've got a lot less time, maybe 15 minutes, maybe even less. A lot of the survey results seem to hinge around 20, although that feels high to me if we're trying to have some risk you may not get back there in time. But for instances, we can make this thing appear outside the instance. You can't just do that with dropping items directly on the ground, or you get the same thing that happened when the Queen Black Dragon launched in the other RuneScape, where lots of people went into an instance, all from one place, all died because it had a Queen Black Dragon in it, and their items all fell right outside that instance, and the game couldn't have that many items all in one small area, so most of them got deleted and people went back to a gravestone and found nothing there. The tech design we're looking at doesn't have that problem because the items aren't stored physically on the ground, they're stored in escrow, and the gravestone is the thing that makes them available to you when you go to that place. So you'd be benefiting in that situation because otherwise you wouldn't be able to get them back at all. Also, if you can't connect to that world, fine, you can use another one. They'll be there, that's a benefit for you, but it's not exactly EasyScape because the difficulty of logging into one world rather than another shouldn't be what the game's about. And I hate when it is. Also, of course, instances that don't. No, we've covered instances. Anywho, by doing it like that, we hope to be able to make the risk fairer, because it will be less dependent on whether you can use the same world immediately after your death. And also, it's not as long, so there is a chance you won't get your stuff back. And also, the way we've done with chests like Torfin's and Petrified Pete, I think we called him, and the various chests around Grotesque Guardians, they've got one. They charge a fee. For this, since we're giving, it is quite a long time, especially if you chose to log out for a break in the middle of it, we would like there to be a fee as well. Now, for your low-level stuff, your tools and all that, a fee isn't really appropriate, wouldn't need to charge one. But you're walking around with your best-in-slot stuff, then if that's in there, then we would like you to pay to reclaim it. Those chests already take money direct from your bank, so you wouldn't run all the way back there, find you forgot to bring your money, realise you don't have time to run back to the bank and fetch the money. We already covered that. And it would also take money from what was in the chest, by the way, because that made sense. The idea being that you'd have slightly more risk if you're running around in your best-in-slot stuff, which currently, barring connection problems, you are very much guaranteed to get your stuff back in 60 minutes. So there's no risk at all and no disincentive to always use your best stuff. Now, I've heard from players who feel that that's unfair. Like, they've paid for their amazing kit. They feel they deserve to be able to use it without risk everywhere. Yeah, about that, we do feel that a bit more risk might be good for the game. Sorry.
Cool. Thank you very much for the overview. I've seen in the chat a few questions players have about the mechanics. What I'll say is wait for the blog, and we'll ensure that there's a kind of clear avenue for you to be able to have your questions answered ahead of its release. So some players have been asking about banked 580 and why it led to some players being muted. So overnight, somebody realised that saying banked 580 could get you muted, and then told other players, don't do this because it will get you muted. And then naturally, people did it to see if they get muted, and then they were muted. So around, I think about 8 a.m. UK time, all of the mutes that incurred were removed, were completely quashed. So if you did it, you're all unmuted. I've got some bits of info from the anti-cheating team. Basically, it's kind of linked to the way we used to approach mutes. We add certain phrases, and we could trigger that kind of behaviour, and then it would lead to a mute. And so what we did after we quashed those offences was look at other ones as well, other similar ones from the same era, and we've removed those.
So why was Bank 580, or I assume it wasn't on the list itself, but it was obviously, you have a list of words and Bank 580 is somehow close to one of them?
So looking through the list, it's to do with, so when players were perhaps hijacked and then in the Grand Exchange, they were spamming like search Banked 580 on X platform to get some free stuff or something like that.
Fair enough.
But you can say it again now if you want.
Also, colon bank.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. And ahead of that, I would like to apologise for my pronunciation. I tried to Google how to do it. Sorry.
Is this something we can talk about as well? Like we had that thread come up on Reddit about like the racism in clans and
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
and that sort of things. Are these words that we can make even like obviously we have a filter, but players can turn that filter off. Are there words that we can say will be filtered even with that filter off?
I'm unsure. I personally, there are certain words that as a player of a game, I don't see the need for anyone to use at any time, and I'd be in favour of make it impossible to say certain words at any time.
Yes, I actually brought it up with one of the heads of support a couple of weeks ago because I got curious about this even before that particular Reddit thread kicked off. Seems that they were concerned that if they went that way, they would have the risk of false mutes from all the variants they'd have to catch. People replace the letters to try and get around it. And yet, considering the other kind of things that can clearly happen, perhaps it's a stance that will get revisited, or even if they only blocked the words themselves and accepted if a player works around it, that's on the player, report them, let support team take action.
And for me, that's still better than seeing the full thing. So,
because if you type in that word, why are you typing that word, and can you go find somewhere else, or maybe just don't, maybe just get knotted or something. So maybe that will get changed.
Sure. So it's on a similar subject as well. Player Support have a blog planned. So I'm not sure when it was. Towards the end of last year, they sent out a survey asking you, the players, what you thought about player support, what you thought about subjects like toxicity in game, scamming in game, whether or not you take the right action. And I believe they are looking to share the results of that in the upcoming survey about toxicity, which I'd imagine would then inform their strategy going forward. Yeah,
and just to clarify, I think all of our opinions is that this sort of stuff is completely unacceptable in our game. I mean, I don't want to be the developer of a game if there's the sort of players that are playing it. Like, we want to stand it out. We don't think it's acceptable at all.
Yeah, some players might point to the existence of a profanity filter. I'd counter that by saying that exists to allow you to say certain words, but it's not a
license to be offensive.
It's not permission to be offensive.
Technically, if you turn off the filter, then you're opting into being offended. But it doesn't mean that it's okay to use them, even if the filter has a toggle. The risk, of course, is that if certain words are auto-muted, and there are other words that are just as horrific that are not caught in the first batch we add, it will be held as evidence that we thought those words were still okay. Well, you'd be misrepresenting the situation if you made that argument, but hopefully we'd be able to catch certainly the most significant ones.
Cool. Okay, for the next question, Mod John, could you perhaps show the image we've got? So this was a suggestion we saw. So could clicking on an empty equipment slot while banking show all available items that fit that slot? And Mod Ash, I saw you reply to a suggestion on Twitter. I don't know if you'd like to clarify to everybody else.
Oh yeah, I came across this on Twitter and replied. Showing it shouldn't be a problem at all. Obviously, it might be a rather long list, so scroll bar going to be needed, I suspect, if we went that far. But because you might have a heck of a lot of these things, but showing it isn't a problem. The bit where you'd then be able to equip it, which would obviously be wanted, that is more of a problem. See, ever since RuneScape 2 was written, and possibly even RS Classic, all the code for equipping items assumed they'd be in your inventory. To make it able to work from an arbitrary inventory like your bank instead of your carried inventory, that means all that code's got to be moved from one form to another, which I'd rather like to do, but you're talking...
it's a meaty task.
Yeah, some 1,000 items with requirements. Get one of them wrong, suddenly anyone can go and equip Durok's axe without the requirements. Fairly big deal to players, so it would hurt you if we make a mistake doing a project that size. And this is far from being the only thing you guys have asked for. If, for example, I had the choice of do this or carry on pushing the death project, I'd rather address death. Not just because I'm feeling a bit emo. I think it would be more of a thing for the game than this usability. So, yeah, it's a big thing. And while we don't mind projects being big, because let's face it, we were planning on programming stuff anyway, it's what we do, I don't think this one's going to get done anytime soon. Sorry.
Cool, thank you very much. Thank you, Mod John. Will Crack the Clue or a similar Easter egg challenge return to Old School since Matt K is no longer at Jagex? I guess this is for somebody to either take the reins and...
I wouldn't rule it out. You just need some evil genius to come along and write something.
Or we
For what
could
it's worth,
probably...
if he were in the mood, we would be able to use him as invite him to be a VIP guest contributor of clues if he wanted to, and if players still liked that kind of content. I do feel there's the risk that we end up spending quite a lot of the artist's time making fancy kit that doesn't have a huge in-game impact, but it was lovely to see players working together to solve the last ones. So I'd like it.
I wonder then whether the fancy kit in game was such a key motivator, or it was just the problem solving. In which case we wouldn't need so much of the artist's time, and we could just use some riddles.
I think it was more the getting to be the first person who discovered it and that sort of thing. Because the kit itself looks cool, but it's just cosmetic anyway, so I don't think people
It is quite a flex, being the first person.
Exactly.
I suppose once that's done, the kit doesn't form a flex at all.
Yeah. I think the first person even got to get an exam in on the actual last piece, which was pretty cool.
Cool. Okay. Perhaps there's a volunteer in house. If not, maybe Matt will oblige. Okay. Could you add a produce sack similar to the herb sack? It would be for collecting other farmed produce like snape grass. What do you think?
You stick it on your leprechaun to note it. Works in most cases. There's like belladonna that doesn't support that, and very little else. I know it's not as good as a sack that carries all these things at once, although I'd be a little bit cautious about letting people carry unlimited numbers of some of the edible ones.
Cool. Okay. What's the latest on the suggested Sarachnis respawn timer change? I asked that only because it's been mooted on previous Q&As quite a bit, but I think we've agreed to add that to the next poll, I believe.
Yeah, I think it's likely to be on the next one.
That'd be poll 70.
It's pretty random whether we give them a number or give them a title.
I've been meaning to ask why we do that, because we've done hundreds of polls, but we've had
I think where we've got an interesting title, we don't bother with a number, and unless we really want to.
Right, okay.
It feels like poll number something feels more like general random quality of life type things.
It
whereas-
usually is that way these days. I guess that's the convention we've evolved.
In honour of this entire game and that meme set down there, we should just stop on 73 and nothing again.
Since the numbers have no meaning, we could make all of the ones after that 73.
Point
Yeah.
1, point 2, point 3.
73A, yeah. Okay, to the chat. Big Trev asks, what would happen if you died with items in a grave? So back to the proposed death rework.
So, we didn't have a good solution to that one in the last draft of the blog, which is one of the reasons we shelved it while we came up with a better one. And then other things got in the way, as they do. What we're thinking at the moment is we would like you to not lose everything that's currently in the grave, because that would be really harsh, especially as you may not be carrying very much when you run back to loot your own grave. But what we'd like is for you, the stuff you're now losing on your second death, to be compared against what's already in the grave, and have the most valuable ones from all of those together stay in until the grave is full. And if the grave does overflow, which inevitably things do, it'll be the least valuable stuff that gets lost at that point.
And we can choose how big that
Yes, we can.
inventory is as well.
Oh yeah, I'm just open to the idea that it won't be infinite, and if a player
Yeah.
just keeps dying over and over and over and over again, yeah, it begs the question what they're playing at and whether they should maybe do something else. But I'd like to design in the spec what's going to happen when it happens.
I just had a thought. So if I don't know, they
It's
died.
about the duration extending.
No. This is about. So say you died on the other side of the map.
Yeah.
Rather than run all the way over there, could they just die again somewhere near Lumbridge and then access that one, or they have to go to the other one still to get
I'd
that
expect the
stuff?
first one to persist,
Yeah, fair enough.
rather than letting you summon your grave to Lumbridge.
Yeah.
Players have
Smart move.
suggested that we have an alternative to your grave, like Death's Office or something, accessible in Lumbridge, so that if you pay a much higher fee, your items are brought to you. While we do like cash things, I think you've established earlier in the stream, we feel that it's more traditional and old school for your items to fall where you died and for you to have to go there, rather than be able to have everything piped straight back to you on demand. On the other hand, players may feel differently, but my instinct would have been to stick with things going where you died.
Yeah, I think the only place that... So, obviously one element is that could be convenient. The other element is if it's like Armageddon God Wars and you haven't got a key and you know you're not going to be able to get back, having an option to be able to say, oh fine, I'll pay a fortune and then I can get it. Depending on what that cost is. But
One of the things we had considered was that if you died in those 4 rooms, as a special exception, move your loot outside the room. That's
yeah,
not something I'd necessarily feel obliged to do, but
what we could do.
we acknowledge the idea. By the way, we are aware that it used to be 2 minutes back in the day, and we're looking at higher numbers here. Frankly, it's been at 60 minutes for a very long time, and I think this is still a very big kick to players who are accustomed to it being that way. It is capable of being adjusted, like things like the combat level or attack range on PvP worlds, and but you'll understand if we do not go so far in potentially alienating a lot of the players, because we are still adding a heck of a lot more drain than there has been in the last, 5 years now?
Yeah.
6 years, I think, now. Get on.
So we're coming to the end of this stream. I'm still seeing more questions about the death rework, our motivations for doing so. I'd say wait for the blog. I'm sure it'll answer a lot of your questions, and we'll also add an avenue for you to submit more questions following the blog, and we can hope to clarify any information there. I will wrap things up. So we updated the game one day early today, so you could hit !game update in the chat to learn more about what we changed with the game. Also, So in respect to Bounty Hunter, we intend to bring it back towards the end of March and also revisit our plan for PvP generally, long term. So !PvP ideas to be sent to a form to send your ideas to us. And they could be anything. It could be to do with the changes to Bounty Hunter. It could be to do with Deadman. It could be a PvP-based league. It could be something in the Wilderness, Last Man Standing, anything PvP that could help inform our long-term strategy. That's where the real challenge lies. Like, we know there are lots of different mini games that rely on PvP, lots of different communities within the Wilderness, within those mini games. How can we take all of those players, all those communities, all of those systems, and make it part of one big long-term cohesive strategy? That's pretty much it from me.
One big thing, next week's update.
Next week's update, yeah.
Massive one.
Good one, that's a big one.
Nightmare of Ashy Hammer, the new group boss coming to Mauritania.
So Thursday the 6th. Sometimes with big updates, we update a bit early. Are we planning to do that, or is it still going to be aiming for the usual time?
You know what? I'm not the upload manager anymore. So Mod Z and Husky and Flippy and Rock can agree on that between themselves. Yeah. I don't think there's any engine release due next week, unlike today, so they shouldn't have to synchronise with any other teams. And mind you, the thing about Song of the Elves is we went early because it's a very, very long quest, and we wanted people to be getting to the end of it before like midnight, so that we have better monitoring. This one, I don't think it's going to be quite the same, although it may be a while before people get the top end loot from it. But if they can go early, maybe they will. Cool.
Oh well, if the time changes, we'll let you know in advance, of course.
So yeah, get your equipment ready. Watch the teaser trailer. I think that's out now, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Watch that, but be on next Thursday morning because it's going to be exciting, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. All good.
Hell
Excellent.
yeah.
Thank you very much for watching, guys. Have a lovely week.